Hello, hello, welcome. I want to acknowledge up front that I'm going live here, which is Facebook and YouTube, and I'm going live here, which is Instagram. And that there seems like there should be a better way to do this, but it's the one I got right now. So welcome here, and I'm gonna switch back and forth, which is a little bit odd, and it's the technology that at least I have right now. So just naming here, I really want to talk about kind of holding our work in the world, our businesses, our lives from the perspective of ecosystem and what that can really do for I would call it really, it's like for the full thrival, certainly of ourselves, but also for the full, expression, the full blooming of what might be our work in the world, for the, I want to use the word ease, but ease isn't exactly correct around the way that things can be easier in business and in life, but I don't necessarily mean that means that there aren't challenges or that we don't work hard. But there's something about when we bring this perspective of ecosystem, holding these as ecosystem, that there's a real shift that happens that I do find actually there's just got to be a better word. It'll come to me later, but in some way does make things easier. And I think some of that, I guess I'll just say, is that it becomes less I-centered and less personal. And in that way, when we're part of a larger ecosystem, it's like, oh, even when there's hard work to be done, well, we're embedded in an ecosystem. And in that way, it becomes easier. Like, oh, this is for the thrival of the whole system. So that said, so this is really about like honoring and working within the ecosystem of our business, our work, and our lives. And so right at the outset, I really want to offer, I guess I'll just say prayer. I want to offer a prayer that this, in some way, this benefit, I hope this benefits you personally because you are part of the ecosystem. But may this benefit the health and the thriving, like the overall well-being of all the ecosystems, including the very personal, the personal ecosystem of our lives, the way that touches other ecosystems. May this actually benefit the way that we walk on the earth, such that there is more health and correct balance in the ecosystems in which we live, wherever we are in space and time. So I am coming to you just after 1 p.m. in the afternoon from the west coast of Northern California. And I invite you, wherever that may be, afternoon, evening, whether you're joining me live, whether you're joining for the replay, I welcome you wherever you are in space and time. And also, as we begin, I just want to acknowledge that when this idea really came to me. Somebody asked me a question, actually, or no, what happened was that a colleague of mine reached out to acknowledge he went to my website, and he's somebody that I've known for over 20 years now. And he was like, oh, I'm just really impressed by, what, like your offerings. And there was something about it where I thought, oh, this is this thing that I do that I don't really think about. And it largely comes from honoring this as ecosystem. But there's a way that people come and they see, my work sort of more fully formed. It's almost like the story of the Buddha is that he sort of came from his mother, like stepped out of her side, fully formed. Or I think there's a story of Athena like that too, right? Fully formed from Zeus's head. And I know that not just me, but other colleagues of mine, other creatives, other teachers or coaches, it's easy to sort of come into their work such as it is and be like, it's like that, they just created this. And so, a big part of what I want to do here is offer some perspective on this, but also to some extent, I might say, pull back the curtain And again, whether you're watching the replay or whether you're watching live, I invite you to share, how does this resonate? Do you have questions? How might this relate to your own life, your own work? But I kind of want to pull back the curtain and be like, it wasn't always like this. Because so often when we look at something fully formed, it's just like, oh, it's just been like that. It's always like that. They've always had this idea. We don't see all the steps. And even if we cognitively know there were a lot of steps, or, they probably failed and stumbled along the way, or there were, certainly I can say I've had plenty of ideas that didn't fly that you don't see on my website now. Or that even things that you see now, the kind of layering or slow evolution of the creation of these things. So I just want to name that a little bit. And I want to say, so I had this idea. I was like, oh my God, I want to talk about this. I got really excited. This is part of just who I am as a being. I posted on social media. I was like, I'm going to do this thing. And then I sat down to kind of write about it. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, like I have so much I want to say. I don't know if this is the best format. I don't know, people want to sit through an hour plus long live. I may very well end up making this the theme of my open community call, which is on May 12th, I believe. It's a Friday. And you can find those on my website. If you're not already on my mailing list, you can register and they're free. So I may very well bring this as the theme, because I think that Zoom, while still virtual, allows for a little bit more interactive quality. There's something about this like monologue quality to, Instagram and Facebook lives. And I try to see your questions, but I don't know if I always see them. And but please do feel free to share and ask questions along the way. So I've touched on this already, but when I was really sitting down going like, this is way too much, I can't possibly cover it all. When I just paused for a moment, I realized, the biggest thing I do believe, and I don't say this to be cryptic, I say this because I really believe it's true. The most important thing that I want to impart actually is shifting one's perception, I'll say, or your perspective to one of ecosystem. And there's a way that when we orient towards our life as an ecosystem, maybe our family as an ecosystem, or we could call it our business or our work in the world, right? Like whatever it is, I think sometimes it gets confused, right? Our business is like how we make money, and maybe there's some heart offering, in some way that's our work in the world. And so what is this ecosystem? And that might be slightly different than what we consider our business, or how do we weave these things together? I'm sorry, somebody just said there's no video or audio. And so I got I'm like, I'm not sure if there's something I need to do about that. Okay, I'm gonna keep talking. I'm gonna hope that this is working somewhere. Okay, good. Somebody else said they can see it, so. Whew. Okay, so coming back to actually just sitting in our seat, right, and orienting towards, let's call it our work in the world, our business, our life as ecosystem. So one of the main things that I think is important with this is that when we relate to this as ecosystem, it includes that we are part of it. And part of what this does is that it pulls us out of the binary of either being the center, right? Like I have to do all of this. I have to figure it out. I'm putting offerings into the world. I'm doing, like there's a centering that can happen that's not so helpful to what I would think of as like the flourishing of our business or the flourishing of our lives. But then there's also this way that we can pendulate out of that to separating ourselves from it, which is, I'm here and the work is there, right? So there's like a way we can center it. It's all about, does it work for me? And it's my work. And then there's a way of like, I have to put this out into the world, and there's me, and then there's the work. And so if we really, not just as an idea, not just as a nice word, ecosystem, but we go like, well, what does it actually mean to be part of an ecosystem? What does it mean for my business to be an ecosystem? Well, what that means is I am part of it. I am not the only thing in it that is not an ecosystem. I mean, first of all, in any place, right, if there was just one thing, one being, that would not be a healthy ecosystem. But also, if we think about like monocrop is not it. I guess in some sense it is an ecosystem. It's an unhealthy one. So monocrop is an unhealthy ecosystem. So if it's only me, there's an unhealthy quality to the ecosystem. But also this idea, I am not part of it, is not accurate either, right? It's like, it's not just like, oh, me over here kind of like stirring the ecosystem. It's like, oh no, if it's my life or it's my work or it's my business, I am part of it, which means it also has to include me. So even just having this orientation, what is it actually to be part of it? It means that I am related to it. I am part of it. I am not the center of it. And in some way, this siloing of either becoming the center of things or being separate from them, I would say I think this is the source of the biggest issue that people have. In particular, I would say entrepreneurs that are kind of like, this is my business. And then we either separate ourselves or we put ourselves at the center of it rather than a piece of a wider ecosystem. And when you really imagine some ecosystem, maybe it's a meadow, right? Maybe it's a forest. Maybe it's this area of a river. Maybe it's this area of redwoods or a desert, right? And some ecosystems, there's like microclimates. I kind of live in a microclimate, actually, like in this tiny little town where we get like significantly hotter and significantly colder than the surrounding areas. And that's important to know. So there's this idea, that's often kind of in the business coaching world, this realm of like make it work for you. And that is true. It needs to work for you, but it's not just you. Or sometimes, then we can go into this idea of like, well, what do they want, right? Like my work, I'm over here, my work is here, and like the people I want to serve are over here. We're all kind of separate, and I can get very focused on what do they want? How do I make it what they want? And neither one of those polarized ideas really works. But if we're all part of an ecosystem, if I'm part of the ecosystem, if my work or my offerings or whatever that is, if that's part of the ecosystem, if the people that I want to either be my clients or participants or members or something, they're part of the ecosystem, then actually it's imperative that I include all parts and that no part is actually more important. Even in a beautiful, healthy forest, right? It's not that the wolf is more important than the rabbit or even the grass, right? Or whatever the rabbits eat in the forest. We feed them, carrot tops, but they find, right, all the greens, like that's essential that there be the rabbit. And then the rabbit is essential that there be the bobcat or the coyote or the wolf. And the wolf is essential for that, and everything then works in concert together. So just this awareness that there is an ecosystem and that we are part of it, that the impact on us is important, our impact on the other parts of the ecosystem is important. The people that we want to be engaged in our ecosystems we're all important parts. And it requires that we pay attention. So I also just want to name that ecosystems touch, right? We sort of have this idea, well, there's kind of two pieces I want to name here. And one is, probably each of you, and maybe many of us have a similar one, but I'll say the word ecosystem and it's almost like a little image. Will probably, if you're visual, maybe it's more like words for some of you or a feeling for some of you, but you'll have an idea of what that is. And some of you, it's going to be more like a rainforest, or for some of you, it's going to be more like a redwood forest, or for me, it's like Northern California oak forests and with meadows and wildflowers and a river running through. And some of this might be dependent on where you grew up or where you live now. But in that, again, a desert is a healthy ecosystem. So we use, as humans, again, some of this depends on our own, where we've lived and what we're accustomed to, but also culturally, certain things become norms, but we'll use words like uh, to mean barren. Whereas, the truth is, like, a desert is not barren. It's not any more barren than a redwood forest, but it's a very different ecosystem. So what is needed in a desert ecosystem for health is very different than what is needed in a Northern California oak grove for health, right? So when we use this metaphor of ecosystem, it means we have to pay attention. We actually have to be present to the ecosystem we're in. Is it, and what season we're in, right? We have to be actually present and then attend to and respond to what is needed now. What I live in this microclimate, and I have a garden, and certain things die in the frost and other things don't do well in the hot sun. And where in this ecosystem will they actually thrive, and how might I need to attend to them in winter or in summer, given the ecosystem I'm in? And that, I'm talking very physical. So again, like, I could move if I think this is, and that's somewhat true of our lives and our work in the world. Like, if we're finding that the way that, the ecosystem of my work seems like this, but it's not working, like things are dying, things are getting crisped in the sun, or things are freezing, or things aren't getting enough water, either I need to go like, but this is the ecosystem, so how do I respond? Or I need to like up and make a new ecosystem and really choose that for the work that I want to do. But mostly, I think, again, if we really have that sense of some sort of a calling, that it's actually being responsive to, that is going to, that actually is a certain kind of ecosystem. It's going to call for something. And for some people that will call more, so it's paying attention rather than the trends of like, it's all about one-on-one and that's the way to make money, or it's all about groups and that's the way to make money, or you have to have an evergreen program because that's the way for passive income. Or if you hear anything that says that is the way, I will guarantee it's wrong. I hesitate for like always and nevers, and I don't like to say right and wrong. And, I'm very like I'm always for this kind of the winding middle path and for nuance. But the truth is, if anyone is telling you this is the way, this is the only way, or this is the only way to da 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 da, like there always will be another way. That may be true for a certain ecosystem. It is not true for all ecosystems. The way that the way that the word rainforest, it's not the same. The rainforest that exists in Brazil is different than the rainforest in other parts of the world. And what is needed for the health of that system is different. So I'm like being passionate, passionate invitation to pay attention and notice what is actually called for. And it does actually, your thrival, your personal thrival is part of that. It's not the only thing, but it is absolutely part of it. So we can't remove ourselves and sort of martyr ourselves, that to what we think is the ecosystem or what the work needs. Because if we are drained, if we burn out, the ecosystem itself is not thriving, because we're part of it. But if we only focus on ourselves, often that's to the detriment of other parts as well. Okay, so that was a tangent. Okay, so there was two things, which is that there are many different kinds of ecosystems is important. Oh, but also it's the understanding that ecosystems touch, right? They're not siloed, like this is here and then there's like a line and then it's a different ecosystem. And what we see when ecosystems touch each other, right, is very rich. That's rich space. That's the space of marshes, right? That's the space of, but it's where these spaces touch. And the reason that this is important is because we are also not siloed. So in one sense, you could say like my life and my work is an ecosystem. And then there's my partner, right? And his life and like his work is included in that or something. And our ecosystem touch. This is also true with my children. And then there's like a whole other ecosystem that we would call our family. But it's important to recognize that we're going to touch up against other ecosystems, and that might be kind of bumping up against other things in the world, or it is our love partnership, or our friends, or other people in the industry, or but the reason I really want to say this here is because there's sort of what I consider to be like a misunderstanding around work-life balance. Now, I'm not a big fan of the word balance, but I will say what there is sort of like correct, I mean, I call it right relationship, could be correct balance. And it's healthy ecosystem is what it is. And the reason I don't like the word balance is because it sort of implies a stasis or some sense of stillness or a static quality. And if you look at a healthy ecosystem, it's constantly modulating. It's constantly changing. They even move. I mean, literally over time, you'll see, and it doesn't even take like eons, right? It's like you'll see ecosystems will literally shift places. And it's because they touch, and then something shifts and the environment shifts, and now this is over here, and now this is over here. And so allowing that that's true, not just as some sort of linear continuum, like, well, I started here and now it will shift to here, but allowing that through the seasons, both the physical seasons of the place that we live in, as well as the season of life that we're in, as well as the season of the just throughout the year, how that shifts throughout the month, these different pieces, like there are cycles, there are seasons, there are ebbs, there are flows, there are times for various things, and they relate to the external seasons, but we also have internal cycles. So if we hold it like work-life balance can be achieved, then it's almost like we're siloing these ecosystems. Like there's work ecosystem and there's life ecosystem, and like never the two shall meet, right? We should have this balance. We should have, and what that's attempting, I don't think is wrong, right? It's really saying like, it is true in a healthy ecosystem, like this one should not encroach, and take over this one. And there are certain ecosystems that are more prone to doing that, right? And this one should not encroach and take over this one. And of course, this comes from that most of us have seen that the work ecosystem has a tendency to like encroach, right? And take over the life or the home or the family ecosystem. So that's what it's working with. But the way we hold it as sort of static, like there's sort of this thing that we could silo them. And there's almost something we could achieve that would look like this much work and this much life, this much work and this much self-care, this much time working and this much time with the family, or this is how I know that they're in balance. Well, that's not achievable. That's why so many people would say that they're failing at work-life balance, is because they're sort of held and talked about that way, that our language sets it up that way. And then our attitude, our orientation, our perspective sort of sets it up that way. And so again, if we hold this orientation of ecosystem, and then we understand that ecosystems touch, and actually this place where they touch ebbs and flows and feeds each other, then we understand, what's important is that I pay attention. What's important is that I'm responsive, to the day, to the moment, to the person, to what's called for right now for the thriving of the ecosystem. So trying to decide where to go next. I have like some things I want to say, and I have some stories I want to tell. I do want to acknowledge in here the importance of what we could call community for a thriving ecosystem. And as part of that, what I would call teachers, guides, and elders. And, we hold this in so many different ways. And the truth is, we live in a capitalist society, pretty much globally. I'm not saying every place and every spot with every person and every culture everywhere on the entire earth, but across the globe. And so, it's like there's a uncomfortable tension that this often lives in the realm of paying people for these roles. I have a lot of colleagues and peers and friends, so where can you, put yourself into an ecosystem of peers That is really important. Most of us, I mean, I don't know that I realized until relatively recently in my life how rare it is that I have truly been eldered by people that are not just older than me, but I would call truly wise. And that I've had that my whole life. And so few people have actually been eldered, that we're looking for this, like, who are the elders? Who can show me the way? Who are the guides? Which is a quality of listening as well as a quality of guiding or telling or steering. But we need this. We actually need that, there's a way that our learning is meant to be collaborative in this way, and that there should be people at all stages. So I just want to name that inside this, because even within this, it can be like, and now I need to figure out how to do this all on my own. How do I make my ecosystem? And I really believe that we require as beings, right, to be the healthy expression of the beings that we are as human beings. We need this kind of ecosystem that includes community of peers, community that includes elders, teachers, guides, community of humans, community of spirit in some way, and also community of more than human realm. So what outside of the human realm is there to teach and to guide and to show you? What in the place you live is there to teach and to guide and to show you? And I would encourage any of you, no matter where you are, from deep in a city to out in wild nature to the suburbs to wherever you are, to develop a relationship with both the human and the more than human realm that you're physically located to, and that you feel, we could say, energetically, relationally, spiritually connected to. But develop that relationship. It will serve and it will feed the health of your ecosystem. So I'll speak a little bit about this, and then we'll see what kind of time we have for me telling stories. I was looking up to see if there is a word, and maybe one of you knows this word. I was like, it seems like there's a word for like one who teaches through telling stories. I was like, I'm that, whatever that word is. So I know that it can have a bit of a meandering quality, it's more cyclical than linear. But I do actually have some slightly more linear things to offer. So I was recognizing that there are things that I would say, and I'm kind of speaking specifically to like work and business here, but that you see in the realm of, we could just for lack of a better word, we'll say business coaching, or the business sort of spiritual growth realm. And as I was looking at them, I was like, oh, I think that it's like they're toxic mimics of things that are actually beautiful and healthy and necessary for a beautiful, healthy ecosystem. So the first one I would say is niching. And if niching works well, I don't even know if I would say this is true on this particular topic. I was going to say, if niching works for you, then go for it. But I really think that in some ways, niching is like a monocrop. And what we see is that, what we've actually really seen is that can have great yields in the very short term. I mean, this is what we saw certainly there's just moving from hunter-gatherer to agrarian. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, right? But then there's like this discovery of like monocrop and like certain kinds of fertilizer. And it's like, bam, we can do this big thing. And it's just like explodes. And it looks like way bigger bang for your buck. But it's short term. And, and long term, it's not a healthy ecosystem. Long term, what we've seen is actually a deep, deep depletion and extraction of the beings, right? Including the soil, right? The health of the soil when we have monocrop. But what I would say is that what niching, so that's definitely one of the toxic mimics, right? It's sort of like niche, big bang, and it's kind of like, well, it's kind of true, but not really. So, I'll just say like I'm not here. I'm here for, I know it's cliche at this point, right? But for the 7 generations, right? Or I'm here for what not only serves my present time gain, I am part of the ecosystem. I'm not going to remove myself and martyr myself to it. However, right, if it's only my short-term game and it steals from the future, to me, that's not actual success. That's not actual gain. That's not actual growth. That's not actual health. So just gonna be upfront, that's the perspective I'm coming from. If it's not for you, I might not be for you. And that's okay. That's okay. But what I will say that I think that sometimes niching is attempting, but becomes this toxic mimic of, but that actually is like, if we look for what's more true and real and deep, is that there is a focus. And this is what I was pointing to earlier, which is that ecosystems are unique. So it can be important to focus and not be like, I do a little bit of rainforest and a little bit of desert and a little bit of, beachfront and a little bit of snowy mountain. Like that can be all the things. And it's sort of like, actually, you can be wide and expansive and holistic. Side note, for a long time, I contemplated niching as a wholeness coach. It was my way of like, doing the thing, but because I was like, I'm interested in the whole ecosystem, and I always have been. So, but that's different, right? Than saying, oh, I live, on the west coast of Northern California, and that's what this ecosystem is. And it's not, knock on wood, it doesn't snow here. It snows nearby. It's different though. It's not at this elevation. It's not this close to the ocean. It's right. This is actually a thing. And that is also true for our work and our lives. We can experiment with various things and we can play in different realms. And we live in a time where physically we can, wake up in San Francisco and go to sleep in London or, whatever floats your boat. But I think there is also some deep truth to the specificity of like, if I tell the truth about the ecosystem of my life, it's like a Hawaiian island, or it's like a Northern California oak grove, or it's like a wildflower meadow near Mount Shasta, or like this is actually the truth of my ecosystem. And I think that that's what, if we're gonna like what niching is kind of the toxic mimicry of something that is actually true and important, is recognizing the specificity of who we are, what we're here to do, what our voice is, what we care about, and so on and so forth. And that my voice is different even than somebody who may say something similar or teach something similar. That my perspective, my stance, the time that I was born, my age, my life experience, it's actually unique. And it requires a unique attention to the ecosystem of my particular business, work, and life. But that's different than that's this kind of very linear model of like niche and choose one thing and just do that thing and get really narrow. And, you only serve this demographic and this psychographic and which I just think is short-sighted. I'm not going to say it doesn't work at all, but I think it's short-sighted. And it's often what leads people to sort of like these major pivot this and pivot that and pivot, like I was doing this and now I have to pivot here. Whereas when we have this like, oh, it's the ecosystem, and there is some specificity to it, but there's like these subtle shifts. We go, oh, now I'm including this and I'm letting this relax. And it's this one's season to bloom and it's this one's season to be pruned. Like somebody right here on Instagram said, I want to service immigrant Latinx women that don't have access to well-being, right? So there's a way that there's a specificity in that is actually can be important, right? How I'm going to speak is different. So there's going, this is my ecosystem, but not like, monoculture. So the second one I want to talk about that we hear a lot about is like, you need to have multiple streams of income. And what I think is that's sort of like the shadow or the toxic mimic of diverse ecosystem. And I do want to make a little tangent here to say, it is never, quote, off purpose to provide for yourself or your family. So what this means in the realm of like multiple income streams, or what I'm calling diverse ecosystem, again, it's kind of like out of the realm of monoculture. It's like if I only do this very one thing, that has a little bit of lack of stability. Now, I might have a focus of where I'm focusing or what I'm building right now or who it's for, but there might be a couple different ways for that to be. And that can look as diverse as things like I offer Instagram lives and one-on-one coaching and 3 times a year live events, but they're all kind of, intended to serve the same general group of people. And my intention around all of them has a thread that runs through it. So the diverse ecosystems and providing for ourselves and our family. So there's often this like real, again, whether it's subtle or whether it's overt, whether it actually comes from the, externally we hear this, or we have internally this shame, right? Like, well, I'm trying to offer my, my heart's purpose, but I'm like a barista on the side, or, the way I make money is as a CPA, but like, I'm an artist over here and this, and it's like, that is also a diverse ecosystem. When I was, I had sort of originally started my facilitation, teaching, coaching practice, and then basically having 2 children and a separation and a divorce and moving, created an ebb. That was an ebb time for like my work and my business in the world, but it was a blooming time for like my life and my children and, these whole other aspects. And then as I was beginning to bring like, these ecosystems, the shift in them was where they're touching each other, but like one is starting to grow a little bit, was like, oh, I'm coming back into the world of teaching, facilitating, and coaching. And at the same time, I was babysitting for some other children while I had my children. Now, that is not my life's purpose. And it made, like it offered me distinctly less money than I sort of like, quote unquote, could have or should have been able to make as a coach or a teacher. But it actually was what served the ecosystem of my life, because it bridged the gap between the money I had and the money I needed, and allowed for what I needed at that time, was to be with my children at that time. And I could bring other children in. And there was like this little bridge of money that was important. And so I want to say, if you are, creating something that you're either offering for money or for free, or that feels like your heart's work, or you have a calling, or you have a passion, and there's also something that makes you, more money, or the money you need right now, those two are not at odds. They are actually they are working together. And this is the question, right? Again, when you bring it in as ecosystem, how are they working together to create the thriving, healthy ecosystem for my work, my life, my family, right? And in the world, in some way that also was less siloing of like me over here hiring childcare so that I can focus on my coaching career, and my children spending more time with a babysitter, and these other children finding, spending time alone with another babysitter. It was like, we brought them all together, and it was like, okay, great. So this is a healthier ecosystem for me. I'm not saying everyone has to, take on childcare. That might not be your thing, but, you might do consulting, or you might have an office job, or you might be working as a dental assistant, or you might at the same time. And I want to say, even outside of this realm, when I was in my early 20s, I was a nanny mostly. And then also for a while, I had this like side gig as an administrative assistant, like an in-home administrative assistant for one of Francis Ford Coppola's attorneys. And they were like wildly different. Like I'd go be a nanny, and I'd be at the park all day and like eating ice cream with the kids and, washing dishes. And, there's just like the quality of parenting or nannying or homemaking, right? It's like never ending, right? It's like all fluid and flow, and there's no completion to anything. And then it was something like 3 hours a week, and I'd go to this woman's home, and I'd go to her home office, and I'd like file e-faxes and like respond to email. And it was like very orderly, and there were things that could be completed and tasks that could be checked off. And And actually, that supported the ecosystem of my life, that I had these different realms of work. And you may find, I actually think more humans are like this than we know, because we tend to silo people into like this job and this calling and this art, and you're like one or the other. I actually think most of us need diversity to thrive in this way. I was listening to Martine Prechtel talk recently about growing up on the reservation, and I'm sure there are all kinds of different experiences. So I'm simply relaying what Martine Prechtel said about his experience. But he said when he was growing up, he's like, everybody knew how to do everything. You know, we knew how to make our own moccasins, and we knew how to sew our own shoes, and we knew how to make our own tamales, and we knew how to fix our own sinks, and we knew how to, and we always knew that there was somebody down the street who, you know, fixed appliances better. Or if we wanted like the really good moccasins for the dance, we would go to this person. Or if we, you know, needed such and such, we, you know, the best tomatoes, we would go here. But we all knew how to do everything. And I actually think this is like really healthy for humans. So whatever that is for you, again. So anyway, that goes back to multiple income streams and what I think is actually the truth, which is that humans desire diversity and this diverse ecosystem. And whether that means different places that money comes from, you know, whether that's babysitting and coaching, or whether that's being a nanny and being an administrative assistant, or it might just mean that there's like something that makes you good money and there's other things that you do in other ways. And I have a whole thing I won't go into about how you can offer your purpose no matter where you, and I think you can just find it on my website. It's like what living your purpose really means. So, you know, I don't care if you have an office job, or you are a nanny, or you're a mechanic, or you're a social worker, or you're like, whatever it is that you do, you can bring your purpose through that, guaranteed. So it's not even like there's like money work I do for money and then there's my purpose over here. I'm not siloing in that way, but I am saying we might do things for money and we might do other things that feel heart, you know, like the calling of our heart. And that's a diversity of ecosystem. So the third one, now coming back to these kind of toxic mimics or shadow sides of things that I think are actually important and true, is kind of like this idea of like the funnel, which anyway, I just never really I'm like, I don't really understand how that works. I mean, I do, but when I've tried to bring it in, you know, I just don't, I think I don't work that way. So, but I see people try so hard, right? And they just have this idea like, well, first you should have this. This is how you sort of catch people, right? And then they go here, and then they go here, and then they go here, and then they go here. And again, I'm not saying that this doesn't work at all. And I'm sure that there are people who teach it in like more toxic and more healthy ways. And I'm not here to disparage any of that work at all, but to say what I think is like the true spirit of that is really about what feeds what. And the understanding that in a healthy ecosystem, there are threads of connection and they feed each other. And I don't just mean like a linear food chain that has apex predators and like, you know, plants at the bottom that goes in one direction. I mean that the stream feeds something that feeds something else that feeds, you know, that this tree offers shade that allows this to grow underneath. That means that this grows in the sun. That means that this goes over, that there's this intricate web that's far more nuanced and fluid than a food chain, which, you know, tends to look like it goes in one direction. But that this question is really what feeds what, and are the I want to say beings, right? Like even if we look at our business or our work in the world, that we go, are the beings that are part of this ecosystem being fed? Or, you know, maybe it's and then we go to these extremes, right? This is this other part I want to talk about, which is quote, it didn't work. But I mean, we're like, it's not, we go, it didn't work. And we go like, cut the tree down. And it might be like, oh, we need to, if we prune these branches, then this would shift. Or that maybe there is some, you know, shifting of something, but there can be these more subtle shifts that then have these wide ranging impacts. which again are often slower. I'm here for all of your success, absolutely. And I'm totally excited for you or for me, or, if we have something that looks like fast or immediate success. But ultimately, there's this long, slow, what I would call like sustainable success. And that often comes with more subtle, nuanced shifts, and then the willingness to be patient and watch. So that brings me to this piece of like, it didn't work, which I think often means like when I hear myself say it, or when I hear, my clients say like, well, I tried it and it didn't work. What they mean is I didn't get what I wanted. And especially like I didn't get what I wanted in the time frame I wanted it in. We'll say like, in a fight, well, I tried this thing and it didn't work. And it's sort of like, oh, that person didn't have the response that I wanted in the moment that I wanted it to happen. In our work, we go like, I tried Instagram lives, like it didn't work. And it's like, oh, it didn't have the impact that I wanted. What I wanted didn't happen in the time frame I wanted it to happen. I didn't get 1 million followers in one day. And so, and I say this with like no judgment. I think if we can all have a little levity about ourselves, that's very helpful. I try to laugh at myself as often as possible. And so not at all to blame, shame, criticize, judge this part that wants particular things on our own timeline, but to get more specific about it. And that in that way, we tell the truth about specificity. And so again, I'm going to talk about physical ecosystem for a moment and then extrapolate out, which is, so I've been living on this property that I live on, let's see, December of 2019. It'll be 4 years this December. So 3.5 years. So I'm coming into my third, this is like the third spring. Yeah, because it would be like the fourth winter, like numbers. And just watching things. One of the things that I love actually about Facebook, it's probably my favorite feature, and it's very un-Facebook-like, is the memories section. Facebook is really, and Instagram too, but it's designed to be a never-ending scroll, right? The refresh, the endless scroll that you never get to the end, right? This is built in. I won't digress here too far, but the idea is like we can never actually get to the bottom, which is a freaky place for humans to be. Anyway, Facebook memories actually allows me to go back and look like, what did I say or post a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, all the way like 13 years ago. I see pictures of my children and I'm like, oh, I said that, like, oh, I still like, that's actually still really good, or that's helping me today, or wow, isn't it fascinating that I woke up thinking of this poem and I literally posted it 2 years ago, or, this, that, and the other. But one of the things it shows me related to ecosystem, because I take a lot of pictures of my garden, the land that I live on, the land that I live, within, like my walks, and is that I can see the way that things are either the same or different year to year. And I'll often hear people just sort of say like, oh, it's a lot of water this year. And I'll be like, actually, it was raining at this time last year, or they'll be like, oh my God, it's like so hot and it's only April. And I'll be like, actually, it was really hot on the same day last year, so sometimes being able to reference like, oh, actually these are rhythms, these are cycles. And look, it is coming in right cycle with itself. This is actually kind of the pattern things follow. But it's also showing me that now 2020, 2021, 2022, there were some real similarities to the way our garden was behaving. And this year, 2023, is dramatically different in time frame. Like 3 to 5 weeks later, for all, like it was 3 to 5 weeks ago that roses were blooming the last 3 years, and this year they're only just starting. Or 3 to 5 weeks ago when this was happening, and now it's only just happening. And so we go like, oh, things are shifting, right? Pay attention to the actual ecosystem. And why am I saying this? Oh, it worked, it didn't work. So actually, like, the specificity is important, paying attention to what actually happens. What did we do? So I tried this and it didn't work is like, first of all, it's just a very vague way of saying I didn't get what I wanted. I tried something and I didn't get what I wanted. Specificity says, I did this hoping for this, and this is what happened. Oh, I know why I was telling that story. I was like rambling and I was like, why am I talking about my garden? So I'm sorry. But if we get specific, it helps us recognize, first of all, what specifically did I try? And it forces us to, it requires that we acknowledge, what did I want, right? I did an Instagram live. I was hoping for 10,000 new followers. What actually happened was that 13 people watched it. And, and I go like, oh, those are specific number. Those are specific actions, specific numbers, specific. And then I go like, what would I like to do now? Versus I tried a thing, it didn't work. What do we mean? What did I try? What do I mean it didn't work? But the reason I was telling that story is that we've been watching the water on this property for almost 4 years now. And every year we learn something new. So I'm not saying just keep banging your head against the same wall, like expecting new results. If something's not, quote, not working, but we tell the truth, we say like, I did this thing. This is how long I tried. Like I did an Instagram live every day for a year and I didn't get any new followers. And, then we go like, oh, this is, I need to look at this, or this is, so pay attention to what actually happens. And it isn't just keep doing the same thing over and over again, but have these specific things. This is specifically what I was trying. This is specifically what I wanted. This is specifically what actually happened. And so the water, in 2020, things were just much drier. We had these very, very dry winters. And then we had this like insane, I think maybe it was 2021, where we had this insane day where we got like a year's worth of rain in 24 hours. And so like certain things flooded and I was like, oh my God, and then last year, different things happened. And then this year, different, we got so much water, different things happened. But where we keep paying attention, and then it's not like we rip up the entire system every year and build it new. No. We go like, oh, okay. So this is what we layered in one year. And then, oh, we see that we actually need another layer here to meet this water that comes when, like if we get another winter, like this year, this is what we're going to need. Right. But we're not like tearing everything apart and just going, it didn't work, something totally new. So layering processes and I really encourage, when we work in this more nuanced way, it allows us to go learn, even things that I talked about, like niching and multiple income streams and funnels. We can go like, oh, I'm going to try this one thing. I'm going to implement it in this way for this period of time for this specific purpose. And then I'm going to pay attention and go, is this happening? And how can I subtly shift versus like huge pivots or, destroy things or, build whole new things or dramatic. It's sort of like, how can I subtly shift to bring me closer to the healthy ecosystem that I desire, which, here at the coming to the end of this live, just acknowledging like, of course, for all of us, that includes money, and this is why I kept saying it includes us. Like we do our own needs are included in this. They're not the only thing, but they are absolutely part of it. So it's not about just, quote, hope for the best or just keep doing the same thing, even if it's not actually getting us the results we want. But sometimes, with the water, it's like we have to dig the ditch and then we have to actually stand back and watch. Okay, can the water find that ditch? Or did I just put it where I want the water to go? But actually it needs to start here. And it means I need to also dig that, like it might be more work to dig here and here and here, but this is where the water actually comes from. So we actually have to pause, step back, be willing to sit there in the rain for a little bit. I can't tell you how many times my partner and I were soaking wet, with our sandbags and our hose, and just watching, where is the water coming from? Where is it going? Where do we need it not to go? And how do we work with where it is to move it in that direction? Sorry, I got distracted because I got a call and it shifted the Instagram way far back. I'm sorry. So we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I'm going to close pretty close to the top of the hour. I know I haven't necessarily been able to keep total track of comments, but if there is anything that you'd like to ask or share in this time, I'll see if I can pay attention there. And I want to tell just a few stories that I can't go all the way into for the sake of time, but again, a little bit to pull the curtain back and say, hey, it can be like this. And I'll start with my No Man Diet program. Again, partly because it's one of my longest running programs. I think might have been the 7th time I ran it this year in January. And it's definitely, I think there were 70 women in it last year and maybe 65 this year, right? You could arrive in that space and be like, oh my God, Kendra's successful and she just has this thing and she had this idea and she did it and boom, 70 people in a program. And I want to say on so many levels, that program was layered. And the first one that actually is really important to speak to is that I did my own No Man Diet. And my No Man Diet was longer than the one that I run for people, right? I did 6 months. I run a 3-month program. And not only that, so it's I went through the whole process, but it wasn't while I was on my No Man Diet, I was writing my No Man Diet program. I did the process. And it wasn't until I completed, it was almost a year. It was almost a year after I completed my own No Man Diet that I actually put my first No Man Diet out into the world. And so it is important that whatever it is, I absolutely believe every single one of us, I don't think all of us have to be coaches, teachers, facilitators, whatever you want to call it. All these other realms of work are not only necessary, but absolutely wholly filled with purpose, beautiful, essential, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But whatever it is that we're here to bring into the world is the willingness to live it deeply enough and let it actually steep inside ourselves so that what we have to offer has a fullness to it. If we take tea and we just pour water over it and then take the tea bag out immediately, it's a different experience than if we let it steep. Or a stew, right? A really beautiful, rich stew. If it takes time to make the stock, it takes time for all the vegetables to go in. Everything needs to cook together so that it comes together and becomes this rich experience rather than just throwing everything in and then serving it tepid and the carrots are still crunchy. And so that's my first piece, is that's a whole layer, right? And again, it's a certain kind of patience. I actually want to speak to this idea of trust in a moment before I close. Letting things steep. But then I also want to say that the first year, first of all, the first year I ran the No Man Diet, I think there were 20 participants, which I call a total success, but sometimes, again, we can see these much larger things and we think if we don't then match up to that, it's a failure, rather than that's fantastic. I made a decision, and I'm not saying that this particular decision is the right one for all of you, but I want to name it because I want to just broaden the perspective of what, I don't know, what's possible, what's okay, how you can do things. I made a decision when I offered the No Man Diet the first time, that I could either, it was I could pay somebody to teach me how to put together a course, or I could put together a course and I might make no money on it, but that would basically be the cost of me learning how to create a program. And I was in a very deep mastermind at the time. I had colleagues, I had a coach. There were a lot of people supporting me, and it wasn't like I was trying to just do it alone. But I was like, I don't think I need to take a class about the program. Like, I think I need to put it up. I ran that program basically like out of a Facebook group and a Google Doc, so, and I thought, I was like, I'm going to make all the videos. I needed 12 videos. I was like, I'm going to make them, and then they're just going to, like, be automated. And what I found is I actually needed to walk through the program with the participants to feel what was really needed. So I see so many people being like, oh, I can't do that because I don't have time to create all the content, or I can't, start putting it forward because I don't have everything ready, or I haven't decided like what I'm teaching in week 13. So I can't even start week 1. And I'm like, actually you can. I mean, I knew what I wanted to offer, and I had a whole list of like, I'm pretty sure this is the way it's going to go. And I know I want to bring these pieces forward. And, I had clear structure, and I had a lot of guidance around that. This is, again, where community, teachers, guides, elders, like having that ecosystem is so important. This is a huge part of why I run the Fierce Grace Incubator program, is that it's small enough that it's really intimate, and there's a lot of focused one-on-one attention, my one-on-one attention. And then also the community can be very, very intimate. You can actually know each other in that space and like know what each person is up to. But at the same time, it's an alive ecosystem, not this sort of just one-to-one or just siloed trying to do it alone sort of a thing. So, anyway, that might be a space for some of you. But so I had a lot of that support, but then it was like staying actually responsive to the ecosystem of the program, right? And my life was, oh, I need to be in relationship with who's actually in this program, because I know the program starts here, and then I know this happens. But then it was like I couldn't get too far ahead of myself. I needed to feel what would happen. And I found that there were like, I had the list of how I thought the program would go at the outset, and that a couple of those switched. I was like, oh, I taught this piece, and actually this is what comes next. And I put them up on YouTube, and I put them all in a Google Doc, and they all had access to that Google Doc, and they had a Google Doc of resources, and it was all in a Facebook group, and it was beautiful. Right. So everyone who thinks you have to have all your graphics, and you have to do a whole branding process, and you need a graphic designer to do all the things, and you have to pay for a membership site, you don't. You need to show up correctly for the people who will come into your space. Like, I knew I was going to hold those people well, but we often throw so many barriers to even just starting, and you can actually start. So like I said, I did my own whole process. It was a whole year steeping in me before I offered it. I'm not suggesting people just run out there and start throwing things on Facebook willy-nilly, but I am suggesting that you don't need to put so many barriers for like, it has to be like this, and it has to be perfect, and I have to hire someone to do this, and I have to have all the copy written, and I have to have the most beautiful website. And like, there's like, it's like the good enough mother, it's the good enough that you can hold the people really well and correctly in the container. And then year 2 of the No Man Diet, and some of the places where I needed to move energy, I offered scholarships. I invited people that I knew the work would serve in for free. Like, I didn't really make money. I didn't lose money, but I didn't make money. But it was totally worth it because I created the program. Like, I created the program in that time. And the second year, I was able to reuse a lot of the videos, but there were probably 3 of them that I needed to redo because they weren't the right, like, I still stayed with the students along the journey. And I was like, oh, last year this was correct, and this year this actually needs to go here. And this was sort of just right for that one year, but this is actually like the true piece of content that sits in this spot. And it layered in that way. I think it was year 3 when I actually got a membership site, where I started with Kajabi, but we were able to use, I think, but it was the first year that I used all the same videos, and I was like, oh, now it's like that. Year 4, I redid all the videos because I wanted a more seamless experience for my participants. I wanted to actually look like me, like my hair had grown a lot. I wanted to have like the same background. I wanted to create a more seamless experience. But I want people to hear, like, that was year 4 of a program that was running really well. It maybe like was 40 participants for that year. It finally had its member site. Was able to like, but what I want to offer here again is it can be a layering process. And that's how ecosystems work, right? They start with like, oh, this is this way. Now, what is the subtle shift, or what do we layer in? Okay, let's pause. Let's actually see how this works. And let's see if anything needs to be shifted, removed, added, layered in. Like, how do we slow and steady layer in here? And I just want to name, because I'm talking about the No Man diet, that this year, for the first time, and this is where I think paying attention to ecosystem is so important, and what our actually business and work as an ecosystem is, and who we are, how we fit into that ecosystem. Because I have sort of hit this place that most people would look from the outside and go like, that's success. I have community coaches who do a lot of the work day to day of the No Man diet and are there to really support the participants, and this thriving community forum with that, and 65 to 70 participants, and it largely enrolls itself. It should, because it's a really fucking badass program. But it's kind of like the quote automation dream. And I was noticing my own energy kind of dip, that there was this depletion that was coming around it. And I was like, allowed myself to get quiet and just listen, and not go like, no, this is how it's supposed to go. Like, this is the dream. Just keep going, Kendra, like just automate the shit out of that and like roll with it. I was like, okay, what wants to be heard here? Like, what's trying to be heard in this, to this piece of the ecosystem? And it said, pause. And for the first time in 7 years, I was like, I don't think I'm going to run the No Man diet next year. And this other voice was like, you're crazy. You're crazy. It's like bread and butter, like, don't do that. And I was like, it just said pause. So when we listen to the ecosystem, we don't know exactly what will come through, and we don't have to know what it means right away. It's like, I think I'm going to pause. And out of that came conversations with my team where I probably will not run the No Man diet next year, and definitely not in the form that I did run it. I may, for the very first time, don't hold me to this, but I'm like 90% at this point, I may, for the very first time in 7 years, run the No Man diet for a second time, but in a completely different form, where it's much smaller and I'm more engaged and there's more live calls. And I was like, oh, it needed to be revived to have the life in it. And so again, I guess this would be another, like, I don't even know, because I haven't had time to think about this, but the toxic mimic thing that people say you're supposed to get to is like where you can remove yourself and something runs without you and it's automated, and passive income, which I think is a complete bullshit idea. It doesn't exist. I don't know a single person that doesn't have to work for their money. I don't know billionaires, but I don't want to be a billionaire. So, but this idea about like, if what we actually want is a healthy, vibrant, alive ecosystem, the likelihood that we want something that doesn't include us is relatively low, at least as any large part of the ecosystem. Like, that's kind of, it's actually like a dead energy. And that's what I was feeling. I was like, the life isn't here. And what's needed for the life, it needs to shift. It actually needs a new form. So when we relate to our lives and our work and our businesses as ecosystem, I just want to acknowledge, like, then we stay present and responsive, and sometimes what is called for will surprise us. Oh, you need to dig a ditch here. This actually doesn't, this wants less water, not more water. This wants a totally different kind of fertilizer. This plant actually wants a year to just rest. This one wants to be pruned. And that this is what will be called for in the ecosystem of our work, and that it takes a great deal of trust. And this is where I will end. I have like a whole list of other stories I wanted to tell, but you can hear my voice. Like, I've just been talking too much. So I may make this the focus of my May 12th community call, which is free. You just have to register on my website. I'll put it in the comments, at least on Facebook, and I don't know how to do that on Instagram, but maybe I can. so that there's another place where there can be a little bit more engagement around this topic. I feel really passionate about this topic, but I will again also say that this is absolutely the work that, not the regurgitation of this, but the unique one-on-one individualized work of creating this in your life. This is the work that I do in the Fierce Grace Incubator. It is like the love of my life. And if you want to dive into that work, and if I feel like a useful guide for you, like that is absolutely the place to do it. And you can apply at the Fierce Grace website, and then we will have a one-on-one conversation to actually explore whether it's the right place for you. So with that said, trust. The tricky thing with trust, this is the patience. This is the patience to sit back, to watch, and to see what actually happens. I think so often we equate like we say, like, well, I'm trusting the universe. And what we mean is I'm trusting that things will turn out the way I want them to. That's the way I trust, right? It's not just like, that's what we mean by trust. Like, I trust that things will turn out the way I want them to, or in some good way. I will say over time, I have to have some trust that, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. None of us are really going to live long enough to know, but we can live our life to the best of our ability in a gesture towards that arc, in a gesture towards the arc of what we believe is good and right and true and just and holy. And I believe that there is no better way to live your life, no matter how things turn out. Maybe they turn out shit. Maybe they turn out roses. Probably it's some mix of the two. But to live our lives as a gesture towards that which we believe is true and right and good and just and holy is really the only way to live our life. And what I believe trust really is, it's not trust that things will turn out. It's not trust that things will work out. It's not trust that things will go the way I want them to. It's trust that I will be able to meet the moment when it comes. So I will continue to live my life as a gesture towards that which I believe in, towards that which I believe is good and right and just and holy and beautiful. And that whatever the next day or the next moment or the next email or the next conversation or the next whatever is brought towards me, that I can then meet that moment with another gesture towards what I believe is good and right and beautiful and just and holy in the world. And that's all that I can do. But I think it's enough. So thank you for your time, for your attention, for your listening, for whatever way this feels useful. That's my deep wish. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or your evening, depending on where you are in space and time. I send you much love. Ciao.